Good afternoon. My name is Courtney Page, and I am the head of marketing here at RMA. I'm also a longtime healthcare patient advocate. And today we are talking about insurance, benefits, and cost, oh my. And this is the second installment of our series about talking about infertility costs. So I am replacing today, or jumping in for Justine Houle. She is otherwise delayed from coming back to the office. So bear with me today as I'm just starting to read the script for the first time today. But thank you all for joining us for this Facebook Live. I think it's going to be really entertaining. So today I am joined by Shonda Brown. And Shonda, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in again. As Courtney stated, I am Shonda Brown. I am the insurance billing advocate for RMA of Connecticut. I am the team lead, and I'll be here today to address multiple financial questions in relationship to IVF.
Great. So we're going to talk a little bit about IVF because it can be a little bit confusing for people before we go into the costs. So just to cover off on what exactly IVF is. Generally speaking, when a woman's eggs are retrieved from her body, which we do right here in the Norwalk OR suite, they're then fertilized by sperm outside of the body, then embryos are created, and then they're transferred back into the woman's uterus. And so there's a lot of questions about IVF and obviously a lot of emotions. And one of the top questions that people have is as it relates to cost, because for the most part, we always wonder, will insurance cover this? What are the out-of-pocket costs? How much should I save? All of those things. So today we're going to cover off on some of the most asked questions, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's jump right into one of the first questions that I'm sure a lot of us can relate to. So insurance, standardly covering IVF. So are there requirements for IVF coverage? Talk to me.
IVF coverage varies depending on the policy, the insurance provider, and if the plan is federally regulated. Some policies require that patients try to conceive on their own for a year before they allow them coverage.
Okay.
Other policies require that patients proceed with a less before greater. Less before greater means the patient has to proceed with less invasive procedures, such as ovulation induction or intrauterine insemination before they receive coverage for IVF. So in summary, IVF may be covered, but the coverage varies depending on the policy, your employer, and if it's federally regulated.
Okay, got it. And so when some policies require that you have to do it for 12 months, that's because it's the standard definition of infertility, is that if you've been trying to achieve pregnancy for 12 months.
Correct. Then the insurance notes that you are then infertile, and they will allow you to have coverage.
Gotcha. And is that number is less for women who are over the age of 35, typically?
It varies, but yes, you're correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so talk to me about an authorization, and why do you have to wait to get an authorization before you can start treatment?
Okay, so when we call your insurance company, we speak to a representative who then advises us on your covered and your non-covered services. Based on the information provided, we will then submit authorization to your insurance for that procedure. Authorization is a decision by your insurance that a procedure is medically necessary. If we don't get that decision, we then run the risk of that claim being denied, and that puts the patient in a position of not being financially prepared to handle that new financial obligation. So authorization is extremely important to make sure you have coverage when we speak to your insurance company.
Gotcha. So that's interesting. So you guys take care of that for the patient. The patient doesn't necessarily have to do that, or do they?
Well, in some cases, we do require that the patient calls in to give additional information for the authorization, but we start the initial authorization. If there's anything that's needed by the patient, we will advise them, but primarily the insurance and billing advocate takes care of that.
That's great. That's like one less thing that a patient has to care about or worry about.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad that you guys do that. I know it drives me crazy with all of the insurance things, because sometimes it just feels like insurance is a language of its own. So talk to me a little bit about some of the words that we toss around when they're related to insurance, like deductible, co-insurance, and out-of-pocket maximums.
Okay, your deductible is the amount you have to pay before your insurance makes any payment. Your co-insurance is the percentage of cost that your insurance company will pay, and your out-of-pocket maximum is the maximum amount that you will pay to your insurance in that plan year. So the claims that we submit to your insurance are subject to your deductible, co-insurance, or your out-of-pocket. So even though a service may be covered, the patient still may have a financial obligation once the claims are processed.
Gotcha. And so if a woman is individual, then she might have a different out-of-pocket rather than or different numbers as related to what you just talked about, as opposed to if she's part of a family, right? Usually there's like two different levels if you're single versus if you're part of a family.
Correct. Some policies have individual deductibles and family deductibles. Also, some policies require that the patient has to meet their family deductible before they start to proceed with their co-insurance coverage. Other policies state that the patient can meet their individual deductible before they have coverage. So once again, it really depends on the policy itself. It can vary.
Gotcha. So talk to me about, how would a patient find out about this information for themselves? So the deductible, the co-insurance, and out-of-pockets.
So even though we are your insurance and billing advocates, we do ask that each patient calls their insurance to review their coverage so we can work together as a team. At times we may receive conflicting information, and we just want to make sure all the information we're receiving is accurate so we can receive the optimal coverage for the patient.
So it's really a team dynamic.
Yes, at times there is certain information that the insurance can't provide to the insurance and billing advocate. It's confidential, and then we will then have to request that the patient receives that information to proceed with the authorization or their treatment.
Gotcha. So I'm going to go a little off script here, but I promise I know that you know the answer to this. So if they have to call, if the patient has to call, do you coach them on what questions to ask? If they ask?
If the patient has to call at that time, I will know the question that they have to ask because I'm advising them to call.
Gotcha.
Because the insurance company told me I need to get this information from the patient.
Gotcha.
So 90% of the time, yes. We will never leave the patient out blind in the air trying to figure things out on their own. If they have any questions, we're here to help all the time.
Awesome. That's great. And I know Shonda personally, so I would absolutely want her in my corner.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So IVF. It really does come with a lot of medications, especially needles, which is sometimes a fear for people, and other people are totally fine with it. Are IVF medications covered? And talk to me a little bit about how much they cost.
Okay, IVF medication coverage varies depending on the policy. Some patients have coverage for IVF treatment, but medication is not covered. If the medication is not covered, pricing ranges from $4,000 to $10,000 depending on your cycle protocol.
Okay.
If it is covered, it is then ordered through our specialty pharmacy.
Oh.
Specialty pharmacies are a little different than standard pharmacies. They offer specialized care to the patients in the practice, and they specialize in medications for complex medical conditions.
Gotcha. So for the times when the medications are not necessarily covered, could a patient use their health savings account? Because that would technically be a medication, right?
They can use their health savings account if that is a covered service under their insurance policy.
Gotcha.
If fertility medication is excluded on their plan, then the card may authorize the payment at that time, but once the insurance company does an audit, they will see that this is not a covered service. They'll do a take back, and then the patient will then be
on the hook.
Yes, for that balance.
So I'm guessing that you would recommend that patients would want to make sure that they have a health insurance coverage or a health savings account if the fertility medication is covered. If not, it's not really going to help them necessarily.
Correct.
Okay, and they can check that through their benefits or their employer.
Correct.
Okay, great. So talk to me a little bit about the Connecticut state mandate. I know in theory understand it, but it feels a little confusing. Does it mean everyone who lives in Connecticut is all automatically qualified for fertility treatment? Is there an age range? It just feels like there are so many questions around this topic, so hoping you can elaborate.
Absolutely, here to help. So the Connecticut state mandate, there's a misconception that if you live in Connecticut, you qualify for the mandate. That is not true. Your insurer will have to purchase the policy that covers the Connecticut state mandate.
Okay.
The mandate itself offers 4 cycles of ovulation induction, 3 cycles of intrauterine insemination, and 2 cycles of in vitro fertilization. Cryopreservation of embryos, eggs, or specimen is standardly excluded on that policy.
Okay.
So the Connecticut state mandate also has changed over the last 2 years. Previously, they had an age maximum, and they removed that to make sure all patients can receive infertility coverage.
That's great. I know that Lisa Rosenthal and you and Kyle were just down at our at the U.S. Capitol doing some advocacy work with our senators and whatnot, our policymakers.
Correct.
Did you enjoy that? What was it like?
It was amazing. It was amazing to meet many people from all over the country that have a common goal to make sure everyone, regardless of race, gender, occupation, receives optimum fertility coverage. We met with many senators and congressmen and women who are enthusiastic and on our side to make sure these bills get passed to help patients during treatment process.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you were there.
Yes.
Advocating for our patients and for the state. So, okay. So let's move on to payment plans. So RMA does or does not have payment plans for treatment and or outstanding bills?
We do offer payment plans, absolutely. We can help patients pay off their balances in over a course of months if that's what's best for them. Just so patients know, even though we do offer payment plans, you will not be able to start treatment until the payment plan is paid in full.
Okay, so so you can estimate the costs that they would incur, and then they can start the payment plan based on that?
Yeah, so based on the cycle protocol, the treatment plan provided by the physician, we will then review the costs associated with that. If they're not able to make the payment in full, we will then offer a payment plan.
Gotcha.
And once that plan is paid in full, then they can proceed with treatment.
Great. And then if there are costs that happen as associated if the plan changes or whatnot, then they would have an extra bill afterwards, which they can pay off.
Correct.
Okay, got it. So what about if a patient doesn't have insurance coverage? What does a patient do?
If a patient doesn't have insurance company coverage, what they should not do is stress out or fret about it.
Okay.
Because we're here to help.
Good.
We have many opportunity plans to help patients with cycle costs. Our opportunity plans are bundled and discounted, and they also include cycle medication, which is very great.
Absolutely, that's important. So RMA does offer financing as related to that?
Yes, absolutely. We're affiliated with the Lending Club. Approval is based on credit score. You'll apply directly with them, and if you're approved, they'll send your insurance and billing advocate notification. We also are affiliated with Attain for financing. And last but not least, it's really not financing, but it's a great opportunity for patients who are struggling financially. We are affiliated with the Nest Egg Foundation, and we offer grants to patients who can't afford fertility treatment.
Right. So Nest Egg Foundation is actually opening up their grant window starting on June 1st.
Tomorrow.
And it will go, oh yeah, that's right, tomorrow's June. And then they'll be going to the end of July. So go to nesteggfoundation.org to check that out and see if you would meet the minimal qualifications. Also, what you said about the credit score made me remember my dad always said, keep your credit score high. You never know how it might affect you in the future. And this is one of those situations. So make sure you're working on your credit score just in case. Okay, so when it comes to paying for IVF services out of pocket or fee for service, is that actually cheaper?
It varies. The cheapest route is our opportunity plan.
Okay.
But in some cases, patients may not have IVF coverage, but the medications associated with IVF is covered through their insurance policy.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
It's so complex. And if that is the case, fee-for-service is cheaper because your medication is covered. But if that's not the case, the best option for the patient is to proceed with one of our opportunity plans.
Okay, got it. It feels like it's a bit of a shell game.
Yes.
So it's like, where should we put the money? Where's the money?
But even though it's a shell game, we will help you throughout the whole process. So
I believe you because I mentioned I know you and I would want you on my team. Okay, so patients typically have to prepay for services such as PGS or pre-implantation genetic screening when the embryos are tested for chromosomal abnormalities and cryopreservation if they are not sure, then they will have any embryos to test. So talk to me about that.
So in summaries, we collect the prepayment for PGS testing and embryo cryopreservation. And the reason why we do that, especially in reference to PGS testing, is because we have to pay the lab that does the testing.
Sure.
And we have to have payment as soon as the testing is complete. So to avoid a delay, we collect the payment for that service in advance. If we don't have payment, once testing is complete, the lab will not release the results, which can delay the patient cycle.
Gotcha.
The same thing for embryo cryopreservation. If the patient prepays for a service and the treatment is not rendered, that is not the goal, but if that does happen, their payment can be refunded to them less than a balance.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
That's helpful. And so I don't know about the complete cost for PGS testing, but I remember it being significant enough that can they do a payment plan for that as well?
PGS testing payment has to be paid in full to proceed with the service.
Okay, got it. So I think I know the answer to this question just based on being here and chit-chatting with you and seeing how knowledgeable you are, and I'm sure all the members of your team are equally as knowledgeable. But what really sets RMACT's Insurance and Billing Advocacy Department apart?
What sets us apart is that we're not just insurance and billing, it's the advocacy. When we call the insurance company, we are fighting for the rights for all of our patients. We go the extra mile to do appeals, to help find financing outlets. It's not just about this is what is due, you have to pay me now, we're going to bill your insurance. It's about making sure you get all the coverage that you deserve so you can focus on your family building goal.
That's great.
Yes.
So I think that if I call as a patient and I start working with RMACT, the likelihood that I could have you on my team is pretty high, right?
Very high.
That's great. Or if not you, then a member of your team who you train and share knowledge with and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Great. So, okay, so this is clearer, but I'm sure that people will have a lot of questions.
Yes.
And so if patients are considering coming here to RMACT, even before their first appointment with a physician, is it possible to ask some questions of the billing department just to find out what they should be worried about, what questions they should ask?
Absolutely. Before a patient comes in and she wants to make sure, or he wants to make sure they're financially prepared to proceed, they can speak to a financial representative. If they have insurance, we'll be happy to check the coverage and give them an overview of what their coverage is.
That's great.
Or we can also provide them with questions to follow up with their insurance provider directly.
That's awesome. Okay, so definitely give a call if you're considering IVF or fertility treatment, because we can hook you up with Shonda, who will be able to give you some really solid information so that you don't go into this unprepared, because that's the worst thing.
Correct.
You just don't want any surprises, and you are probably being surprised with this diagnosis in the first place. So
Correct.
Let's eliminate all of the surprises.
Correct.
All right, so we're doing this again for our final installment coming on Wednesday, June 20th, okay, at 12, and we're going to be focusing on LGBTQ treatment and financing, right?
Correct.
All right, so come back, join us on June 20th at noon, and we'll talk about that. We also had a prior installment, which is available on Facebook underneath the videos. Justine will be back for that next installment, and I think that we are feeling a lot more confident. Me personally, if I have any questions, come to me about IVF financing. So thank you.
Thank you guys, and thank you for choosing RMA, and we definitely look forward to working with you in the future.
Great. Thank you.